Come along the process of us adding more cash flow to our property. First, we are deciding whether we should put a tiny home, build out a cottage, or do something else to our home. So I like to call this in phases. So phase one would be to do your research in the area of what the regulations are and what you can do on your own property depending on what it's zoned. So for my property, it is zoned residential, so that kind of limits us to what we can do. In every state and county, there are different stipulations to what you can do to your property depending on that. So knowing the area that I'm in, we can build 2 additional dwelling units on the property on top of having the main house there. So right now there's just a main house. We can build 2. The next step would be to kind of research what's your options with that. So it does limit to what size those additional dwelling units can be. And then there's also different parameters of how far they need to be away from each other, how far they need to be away from the property line, and some other things to take into consideration. So I highly suggest working with an architect or a builder that has someone in their office that can help you along the way if that's the route you decide to go. I also had to find out what the timeline was with not only building these properties, but the permitting timeline. So for me in particular, the timeline could be 1 year, 2 years, sometimes it might even take up to 3 years, depending on the work that needs to be done. And it depends on what type of what is it called, water meter you have going to your property, and then also what type of sewage you have, if it's connected to the county sewage or you have your own sewage treatment on the property as well. So with that, there are a lot of factors that play into what is best for your situation. So for me, because I want something kind of done quickly, I am opting to add a tiny home onto my property. So that's where you buy a home that's already on a trailer, so almost like a trailer home, but they call it tiny homes because a lot of them are built out of wood on top of a trailer, and they register them with the DMV, so they're considered a motor vehicle or recreational vehicle, kind of like an RV as well. And so you can keep it on your property as long as it has its own system. So it's not attached to the property in any way as far as electric, water, or sewer, or any other drainage. So that's kind of one way where you can get something up fast, but you just have to be aware of how it connects to all the other utilities. So the next step would be to then price everything out. So you have a timeline, what you could do permanently, which would be adding cottages, the timeline for that, and then also the cost. So to build right now a cottage, maybe I would say 400 or 500 square feet, depending, it would be the next step would be to either go to a building supply store, have them help you draw up whatever plans that you need, and then give you pricing for that plan. So one of the plans that I was looking at, all-in costs to build the cottage would be about $250,000. So this is including materials, including construction, and including any of the flooring and fixtures in there as well. So with that, keeping that in mind, you also have to look at if that is also going to add that same value and equity to your home. And if not, that's another factor to consider. But the other way you can go is adding a tiny home, putting it on, what would be the cost for that? So looking around, the cost for tiny homes vary anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000 or more. But the benefit is you could get it up quickly and you could get it rented out. So next thing to look at is how much rental income can it actually bring in. So for a, let's say, 2-bedroom cottage that's attached to the floor or attached to the property, it could probably bring in $2,600 a month. Right now, one of my tiny homes is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath tiny home, is currently renting for $2,000 a month. So that's a big difference. So when it comes down to it, you have to look at what's the overall timeline, the regulations and restrictions, what can you actually build, and then what are you also open to putting on your property, and then what rental income or cash flow is it actually going to bring in the end. So that will help you determine what is the best next step for your specific situation. The first tiny home that we seen was good. I like the layout. It had a bathroom that had like the 5-foot shower. So that's one thing that I noticed on the previous tiny homes that I've done. They had kind of like a half circle shower, which can barely fit one person. And so for me, looking at the longevity or it from a renter's perspective, I'd want kind of like a bigger shower. So that was perfect, had the toilet and sink. And then right outside of that led to the kitchen, which I like that they had the kitchen on both sides. So they had the sink on one side and then the oven on another. They also had included a washer that also is a dryer. So that's something neat. There's a bunch of windows everywhere. So I like that as well, because in the smaller space helps bring in more light and then also more breeze. And then it had a bedroom area. So the whole flow of the tiny home was good, and especially if there's only one person in there. And then they had a loft on the top where you could either store stuff or have another bed. And then outside of that had a lanai area that he's also including, which is like just an outside space that kind of gives you a little bit more room for your things. And I think that's important too when you're considering buying tiny homes, is just like, what other amenities could you include, especially if you are renting it out and want people to stay more longer term. Just including those little things with any rental would be nice and hopefully get people to stay for many, many years. Now we are headed to see another tiny home that is newer. So the previous one we seen was built a couple years ago, which still isn't that old. The trailer itself underneath the tiny home looked in good shape. It can be transported, and it is actually closer to where we want to put the final home. So the transportation might be easier. The one we're headed to now is a little further away, but I believe it was newly built and seems to have a lot more upgrades. But the style of it is different. So once we get there, I can kind of point that out to you as well. Wow. Smells like a brand new house.
It is like
That's what I noticed.
that.
Wow. Interesting they put 2 sinks.
New paint smell.
Yeah.
But we were remodeling the real high-end one-day kitchen and we had the cabinets.
Wow.
We use those in here.
Yeah. Perfect.
New microwave, new little electric cooktop, and new sink, and
Yeah.
tested everything.
This is huge.
It's big for a tiny home. It's
Yeah.
small for a house, but big for a tiny home. And then the height of it, I know it's tall, but it just makes it feel a lot bigger.
Yeah, especially all the windows too.
Yeah.
Bring some light.
Feels a
Here,
little
wait.
wobbly to see.
Oh. Wait, I'm just gonna turn it on. Waterworks. Microwave. Oh, I love that shower head. It's really nice. What I liked about the newer tiny home was that it just felt bigger. And so they didn't have a separate, like the sleeping area was on top, it was a loft, but they had a bigger bathroom and then also a separate kitchen area. And then they had a lot of windows, like there was windows upon windows. So I think that's important too, for ventilation, especially when you're living in a smaller home. There wasn't an outside deck that the first one came with, but I felt overall it matched the look of our property and our home. Had the gray exterior, the white interior, and just everything felt new, whereas the other one was only a couple years old, but it already felt like it had kind of been used for a while and wear and tear. So nothing bad with it. I actually like both of them, but I'm leaning more towards the newer one. So stay tuned, like and subscribe to see what we end up getting and what the costs are going to be too. Right now there is a slope on the side of the house. If you're thinking about making some extra cash flow from $72,500 on purchasing this tiny home,